Welcome back to my flat, another edition of Stop In with Sian. I hope you're all mainly stopping in still. I don't think the government relaxation of rules means we all have to go out and do everything that's suddenly being allowed. I think it's really important that we do try and keep our distance, try and make sure that if infections come back, we're not part of spreading them even further. That said, it's boiling in my flat already, and I'll definitely be going out later for at least a walk. So we've had a lot happen in the last couple of weeks since I was here. The Black Lives Matters protests have been absolutely effective and fantastic. The work in Bristol was brilliant. But last weekend we saw big gangs of organised far-right racists on our streets of London, intent on causing trouble. And that was really, really distressing to see. That has no place in our city, no place in our country. To remind us of the importance of fighting racism, we've had Windrush Day yesterday, where we celebrate the migrants that have made the UK a much better place over the years. And we also remember that racist policies, things like the hostile environment, they're not a historical problem. We have a job to do in all our democratic institutions, in the London Assembly, in Parliament, in the House of Lords. We have that job to do of standing up against new policies that come out that have discriminatory results. The Greens of Colour group in the past week have done a really good new campaign, 5 demands to end racism and end racist policies, things like ending the indefinite detention of migrants, ending NHS surcharges for absolutely everybody. There's a whole series of demands on their website. Google Greens of Colour and find out what they're up to. So we will be discussing more about institutional racism, protests, civil liberties in today's show. So for the next 20 minutes, this is going to be a continued topic of conversation. And our special guests for the rest of our 20-minute show will be the director of Big Brother Watch, Silkie Carlo, and the Green Party member of the House of Lords, Jenny Jones. So I'll get her on the screen now. We will be discussing privacy issues, protests, all kinds of things. So I'm just going to switch them onto my screen. Here they are. So we have Jenny Jones live from her home, and Silkie live from the HQ of Big Brother Watch. Really, really nice to see you both this morning.
Good to see you.
Excellent. So, well, another thing that's happened in the last couple of weeks is that there was the sudden collapse of the government's track and trace app, which has proved so controversial. Silkie, you were pretty vocal on what was wrong with that approach that the government were taking, and I think you've been proved right.
Unfortunately so. We warned from the start that this was not going to work. It was going to fail. It was a data-hungry, centralised, control-obsessed approach that was completely out of step with what the rest of the world was doing. And really, it's been like watching a slow-motion car crash. Now we've wasted precious time with 3 months down the line, months behind other countries who have developed contact tracing apps. And I believe about £12 million down out of pocket as well on this failed approach that unfortunately was never going to work. And I really hope that the government has learned something here about the public's appetite for privacy, because there simply wasn't the amount of public trust needed to encourage people to download this GCHQ backed app that wanted huge amounts of data with very little justification.
And there would have been a way to make an app that was privacy friendly. Other countries have managed it. I mean, what's the difference? There's the centralized approach, and then there's the decentralized approach. One's more privacy friendly. How does that work?
Yeah, the decentralized approach has been adopted by most other European countries, and hopefully is what we'll do next. With the centralized approach, effectively, it's like having the state issuing digital tags to people, which means that then possession of the contact tracing app could lead on to all sorts of other kind of tracking and identification or list building of people who are have reported as symptomatic or have been in these social networks, etc. So it would have been an unprecedented position for the state to take in terms of issuing these kind of digital tags. The critical thing is as well, you need it to work, and it was never going to work, and you need lots of people to download it. if it's going to have any kind of impact on wider public health. And not enough people were going to trust the government's centralised approach, GCHQ-backed app, in order for it to ever have been able to work.
Yeah, no, in the London Assembly, we talk about trying to bring in a road pricing scheme, and exactly the same questions of built-in privacy, trust and transparency apply. Jenny, you've in the House of Lords, you've been asking questions about this too. I know Jonathan's also been referring the procurement and the waste of money to the audit office. What have you been doing?
Well, in the House of Lords, almost every day we sit, we have a few oral questions and our own ministers have to answer them. And a question came up on the Test and Track and Trace app, and I asked what's happening on the Isle of Wight. And whether the people on the Isle of Wight should stand down. My question was prompted by Vix Lothian, who is our brilliant Green Party colleague on the Isle of Wight. And the minister replied to me that it was absolutely no need for the people on the Isle of Wight to stand down, that it was all working well. Now, an hour and a half after he told me that, the government actually withdrew the app. And people have suggested that the government was lying, but in fact, our House of Lords ministers are so low ranking, I doubt he was told. So very embarrassing for the minister and overall incredibly embarrassing for the government.
So let me get this right, an hour and a half between them telling you everything was fine and the whole thing being cancelled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
obviously, yeah. Vix Lothian, who's our education spokesperson as well, she was on the show 2 weeks ago, so do have a look at what Vix had to say about that on the Isle of Wight. It was quite clear that public confidence wasn't there, basically.
Absolutely not, no.
Well, lessons to learn, and if only we'd got it right the first time, that's all I can say.
Yes.
Right, I need to move on to the next topic, which is, because we could talk about this, the three of us could talk about these kinds of issues all day.
Yeah.
There's been a really serious issue and attack on the right to protest during the pandemic. And Jenny, me and you have been working on these kinds of issues for some time now. Do you want to give us some background to what's going on with the police and the right to protest?
I'm not even sure where to start, but you and I have been involved in
year or something.
Yeah. We've both been involved in court cases against the Met Police. In fact, I've got so many going on at the moment, I don't even know anymore how many I've got. And almost every time we do this, we're proved right. And I've got a mug here which sort of says what I believe should happen very soon. So I hope that's not too provocative. What we've been finding in the House of Lords is extremely concerning, and that is that the government has stopped using Parliament as a democratic way of actually imposing laws, and it's actually using a sort of side door, as it is, that avoids scrutiny. And so, for example, on the coronavirus regulations, which included the lockdown procedure, there was what they call a statutory instrument, which is something that pretty much whizzes through without any scrutiny. And they did this the day after Parliament went into recess. So it was obvious that they didn't want anybody to look at it. And the government more and more is using these statutory instruments to evade parliamentary debate on issues. Now, with a problem like coronavirus, you're bound to want to act urgency, but this is something completely different. And they're using legislation to actually embed ministers' right to just take quick decisions, and that's absolutely appalling. And in fact, it's the government ruling by diktat and evading its democratic options.
So, Silkie, we've seen quite a lot of protests nevertheless going on during lockdown, and as far as I can tell, a lot of the protests, the Black Lives Matter protests particularly, they're trying to make them happen in a socially distanced and responsible way, and as far as I can see, the policing of this has made this worse. And combined with that, we've also got this underlying thing where the police are trying to get more powers, partly based on the court case that Jenny brought when they tried to ban protests throughout London during Extinction Rebellion. What has your group been doing about the right to protest, and what's your fears about these emergency laws?
Well, what's happened over the past 3 months is really extraordinary, and just as Jenny said, of course, you expect the government in extraordinary times to take unusual and even extreme measures, but we have to be incredibly cautious. The police have been given almost arbitrary powers to fine people for being outside of their house or for any type of gathering. And we warned from the start that putting in place such sweeping laws and restrictions would harm the most marginalised and the most vulnerable, and actually have a detrimental effect on our democracy as a whole, if not extremely checked, frequently reviewed, and with very strong safeguards, which, as Jenny said, there hasn't been, because there hasn't been the parliamentary scrutiny. And let's be honest, that's been deliberate. Ministers have deliberately evaded parliamentary scrutiny, which should give us all chills. What the hell is going on? And so now the police do have powers to fine people on the spot, including for protest. And I have seen people being picked off at protests and then arrested under the regulations for being out without a reasonable excuse or for being part of a gathering. And you know, again, this was quite deliberate. We one of the things that we've been doing at Big Brother Watch is briefing Parliament at every turn, every time. Even these kind of farcical debates come up that are weeks after the event, and you know the government's already done what it wants to do anyway. We've warned that effectively banning the right to protest stops all sorts of things. It stops the social movements that we're seeing now taking off, but it also means that the public doesn't have the right to actually demonstrate against the way that the government's handling the crisis. And so I think it was wrong for that to have ever been in place. It's extraordinary, even from a worker's point of view, that you can have people going onto construction sites and that's lawful, but the minute they step off site and hold up a placard and protest about their working conditions, for example, then they're in breach of the regulations and actually committing a criminal offence. So these are extremely unprecedented times, and we feel very strongly that an exemption should be put in the lockdown laws for the right to protest, so that people going, whether it's Extinction Rebellion, Black Lives Matter, strikes, industrial action, whatever it is, that people can peacefully and safely express themselves freely on whatever matter it is.
Yeah, and the thing that worries me is that the policing of this could be done in a way that respects that right and helps to facilitate more distancing, you know, keeps people safe, gives them good advice. Instead, we've seen the return of something we hadn't seen for a while, which is kettling. I mean, kettling must be the most dangerous thing you can do from a public safety point of view if there are a crowd of people that have gathered somewhere. Just guaranteed to spread infection. Jenny, what opportunities are there? If you know, can we get an exemption into the law? Well, we don't know how long the lockdown powers are going to be there. There must be opportunities to change that.
It's something I will definitely pick up and take forward. But quite honestly, we have a government with a majority of over 80 in the House of Commons. And although we have a quite obstreperous House of Lords at the moment, I mean, we started remote voting. We've had 4 votes, and the government has 5 votes. Sorry, and the government's lost 4 of them, and the other one was an innocuous vote anyway. So we're doing what we can in the House of Lords, but unfortunately, we're not the democratic elected chamber. But the government isn't acting democratically anyway.
And you're the chamber that's there to check and balance, aren't you? You're the ones to say, you know, you've rushed into this draft isn't good. And so you'd hope the Lords might be the place where a cross-party group of MPs could do something rational, like fix these big gaps in the law.
Well, already 2 committees of the House of Lords have said how appalling it is that the government is using these powers, which actually, in a democracy, you expect them in an emergency, but you do not expect them as a routine occurrence, and that's exactly what's happening, as Silkie has said.
Yes, no, it's very worrying. Okay, so moving on to institutional racism, I think is the topic again. What we saw straight away with these new powers to control people going outside for no reason, the new lockdown powers, and the fines that could be put onto people. What we saw as soon as we got the data that broke things down by age and ethnicity, and that took a while actually. In the London Assembly, we were asked from week 1 about 10 weeks before we actually saw the data. But as soon as we got it, it was very highly disproportionate. In London, as you would expect, even more so in other parts of the country. Silkie, Big Brother Watch have been onto this from the start. You've been collating examples and as much data as you can get hold of, and raising the alarm about this disproportionality. What have you found?
That's right, yeah. There's two pieces of emergency law in particular. There is the Coronavirus Act, under which every single prosecution brought has been unlawful. We pushed for a CPS review of that because we were identifying cases where people had been arrested, even jailed overnight for no good reason. And that's happened to a lot of homeless people as well, which is incredibly sad. And then under the lockdown regulations, where people can be fined, arrested, or prosecuted, we know from analysis done by Liberty Investigates and The Guardian that Black and minority ethnic people are 54% more likely to be fined than white people nationwide. And we're just starting to get some force-specific data on that. We've also asked for the police chiefs to give that to us, and we've been actually asking them to initiate or support a nationwide review of all of the fixed penalty notices that have been issued. So the tricky thing is, if you're issued one of these fines, there's no way of challenging it really, unless you want to go to a magistrate's court. And as we've seen, you've got magistrates putting people in pursuing unlawful prosecutions or under the emergency laws. So unfortunately, it's not a terribly competent system to be relying on at the moment. A lot of people don't want to risk prosecution.
So you got the Crown Prosecution Service to review all the cases, and they cancelled all of them. Is that what you're saying?
Under the Coronavirus Act, every single prosecution, there are 54 so far, has been unlawful and has had to be overturned. Under the lockdown regulations, 10% of prosecutions have been unlawful and had to be overturned. Now, if you think that's just prosecutions, how many fines? How many people have had to pay £60, £100, £50, these different fines to avoid prosecution? I think those numbers are going to be astronomical, and unfortunately we're seeing they are disproportionately being given mainly to Black and Asian people. This is particularly bad in London, where over a quarter of the fines issued have been to Black people, who make up about 12% of London's population. So it's a huge disproportionality. The worst thing about this is, in a time of Black Lives Matter and growing consciousness about institutional racism, is the Met is not taking any ownership of this and is actually denying that there's even a problem, and even actually perpetuating racist stereotypes such as, well, these are the people who are breaching the regulations more often, as though some kind of inherent criminality, which is frankly sickening. And I'm so glad that you guys have been on the case about this, because absolutely, this is the time that they need to be brought to account.
Yeah, no, I brought this up. So like you say, as soon as that Liberty data came out, that was the first force-specific data on disproportionality. Essentially, black Londoners were 2.5 times more likely to be arrested under these regulations, and that's ridiculous. So I brought that up with the Commissioner at the Police and Crime Committee in the Assembly, which we're now doing remotely, and I was expecting some kind of ownership of it, some kind of, well, we'll take action. This is concerning. Yes, we'll improve training. And I specifically asked this, and the Commissioner really did seek to minimise, deflect, almost deny it. She also brought up another sort of classic excuse, which is that it was geographically based. They're going to where the trouble is, and there are more Black people in those areas. And that kind of attitude, I think, is completely wrong. There ought to be some kind of humility, some acknowledgement that there's still unconscious biases in a lot of police officers, and some advice and training and guidance being given to those officers not to do it. And we didn't see any of that, and I really found that disturbing, because I wasn't expecting that answer, I have to be honest. Yeah,
a lot of conscious biases as well, and it's now, and I think it goes right up to the top. The fact that Cressida Dick is not willing to take responsibility for this, whilst at the same time issuing statements about empathy and understanding with the Black Lives Matter protest and the importance of disproportionate policing. You know, I think time's up. I think that's the main message, and I like I say, I'm glad that there are that you are being so proactive on this, because I think the public has had enough. The statistics speak for themselves, and it's time for the Met to be held to account, and policing as a whole, really, because we do need to see proper institutional change.
Yeah. Right, Jenny. So the other thing that the Met Commissioner, sorry, we're all on Cressida Dick today. The other thing the Met Commissioner has been doing is essentially asking for more powers to ban protest. Obviously, they've got these effective powers under coronavirus, which are wrong. But in normal times, you managed to challenge the Met when they tried to ban protest across London using something called a Section 14 order, which is not for that. You managed to get that struck down last year. Ever since, the Met have been talking about trying to get those powers extended so that they can just ban protest across the capital. This seems like it's going to be a job for you in future to stand up against. Jenny, are you ready?
I am, yes. I mean, there's been 2 reviews, one on police action, on police racism. One of them was from David Lammy. And there are lots of recommendations out there. All the police have to do, they don't have to do their own review. They can just look at those reviews, take those recommendations, and implement as many as they can. But on the issue of protest, I haven't been out there this time. I'm very sad to say, but keep filming the incidents, because that has led to an awful lot of drop prosecutions and in fact cases against police. And also look up NetPol. NetPol gives a sheet on your rights when you are arrested or approached by the police. I think it's very important to know your rights.
Yeah, there's also an app called Why Stop, letter Y Stop, which is very, very useful, because that's an app that's kept up to date with the latest stuff. Tells you what you're allowed to do. And I'm really pleased, like you are, Jenny, that so many people are recognising they have a right to film the police themselves when they're interacting with the police, and that is providing lots of very useful evidence and hopefully some learning opportunities for the police, and some evidence that will lead to some action against officers who are behaving so really badly in some cases, really just awful. So any final words? We're nearly done with the show. Silkie, what's your next steps? Are you going to keep producing that report that looks at the powers? I know that must be a huge amount of work.
It is a huge amount of work, yeah, but I think it's really important to stay on the case and keep supporting as much parliamentary scrutiny as possible. And then when the inquiry comes, I think there's, you know, everything that we're talking about now is just making me think how much this has been dealt with as a public order crisis rather than a public health crisis, really, by the police in particular. So there will be a reckoning in time. But for now, I think, we need to keep up that scrutiny and accountability, and it's really good to work with you in doing that.
We will keep doing it. They will keep providing us with things to do. Let's be honest. Well, thank you so much for coming on. So that's Silkie from Big Brother Watch. Go and read their web pages. Jenny Jones. Your website is jennyjones.org, I believe.
Yep.
If you want to find out what Jenny's up to. And if you want to carry on watching the programme, to get the live link each week, you sign up for updates at my website, sianberry.london, or there's a button on my Facebook page where you can sign up for updates. You'll get the live link to this every single week. And on Facebook, I'm Sian Berry Green. So yeah, hopefully we will be continuing to talk to more and more interesting people about the issues that are coming up, because the issues do not stop coming up. It's been really nice to have you both. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you. Stay safe, everybody, and goodbye. Victoria Line.